Welcome to another episode of the Leading Lessons podcast, connecting with entrepreneurs and business owners across the world, helping identify what makes them different in their industry and what lessons they've learned along the way that's made them get to where they are today. And this week, I get the opportunity to actually interview somebody I had the opportunity to meet at a conference about 6 to 8 months back. His name is Zac. He's actually the fund manager at solving the world's greatest problems, and he's had the opportunity to travel the world and do exactly that and solve some problems. So Zac, thanks so much for being part of the podcast this week.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
So talk to us a little bit about what your last 12 months has looked like.
Sure. So my background is I started my career at Goldman Sachs trading bonds. So I was there for about 4.5 years, sat on the investment grade credit desk, traded international banks, domestic banks, regional banks through Silicon Valley's collapse and all of that. And so super interesting time. Love the intersection of geopolitics and macroeconomics. But I wanted more. I was a little hungry for something that felt a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more purposeful. I had kind of been asking myself this question of what is the alpha that God created me to give to the world or to bring to the world? And I think that's, we find that in some jobs more than others. And I just felt like I was at a point where I'd learned everything I wanted to learn, had made the impact I wanted to make, and was ready for something new. And so I at the same time or similar time started to get this itch and desire that I've had tucked away for a long time, but this passion for helping to advance economic development around the world. It's been a passion I've had for the better part of a decade. I wrote a thesis in college called The Power of Investing to Alleviate Poverty. And was really fascinated by this line from Machiavelli, actually, that said, the reason there will be no change is because the people who stand to lose from change have all of the power, and the people who stand to gain from change have none of the power. And as I chewed on that, I kind of thought, okay, but if you flip that on its head, then the reason there can be change is if you can align the interests of those who have with those who need. And so that was really the thesis of my thesis of my thesis back then, that I kind of tucked away for a decade or so, and just had this passion kind of resurface. At the same time, I started to see a lot of research come across my desk at Goldman that I felt like pointed to Africa being the greatest investment opportunity of the next 2 to 3 decades. I think that Africa just has enormous tailwinds behind it with the talent pool, some macroeconomic trends, the unity with the AU being into the G20, the signing of the AfCFTA, which is the largest free trade area in the world, and just so many things about technology and whatnot that are just fueling economic development in Africa. So I wanted to be involved there. At the same time, I had seen a lot of people with great hearts go to places like Africa and just not quite make the impact they want to make, or sometimes hurt people more than they're helping them, even though they had a great heart. But I think a lot of times that stems from us simply jumping in too quickly with solutions to problems we don't understand and cultures we don't understand. And I didn't want that to be my story. I think a lot of times we think that if we're from America and we have the capital, that we have the solutions to the world's problems, and it's not true. And it requires an intentional listening. And so I essentially partnered up with a private equity guy named Henry Kasner, and we essentially decided that the best strategy in partnering up would be for me to quit my job and spend 6 or 8 months just traveling across the continent, listening to and learning from local people, not bringing capital or solutions or strategies right away, but just listening to people. And so over the last, let's call it 6 months, I've probably had somewhere in the ballpark of 350 conversations with people, ranging from farmers to entrepreneurs, investors, fund managers, business leaders, political leaders, across geographies, across spectrums, across wealth classes, and just listening, understanding where the areas of opportunity are, what's going on. And that's kind of led me here to today. So it's been a journey, and it's been super fun.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I mean, you've accomplished a ton in a very short period of time that some people take decades to even attempt to start scratching the surface of. So when you're over there, I mean, and don't tell too much, because I'm sure there's probably some NDA that you probably signed along the way, but what are some of the primary things that you're really focusing on in terms of how you can improve what they already have?
Great question. No NDAs. I'm happy to share anything and everything. That was one of my core conditions going over, is that I do not want to hoard anything. I don't want to hoard a business idea, an investment opportunity. It's not about me, it's about people. And yes, I think there's huge business opportunities, but at the end of the day, like when I get to heaven, I don't want the question to be, hey, why'd you hoard this for yourself when these people could have been helped? And so, gosh, there's opportunities everywhere. I mean, the talent in Africa is spectacular. Like, obviously in America, we've got a deeper bench, I would say, a more, developed talent base as a whole. But the top 1% in Africa can compete with the top 1% in America, no problem. The average fund manager I've met in Africa can go toe to toe with the best I traded with at Goldman. The best entrepreneurs in Africa can go toe to toe with the best entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. And so there's so many, I guess it's the talent, like there's just so much opportunity because the quality of talent over the last few decades has grown so substantially. And now you've got a lot of people who maybe came to the States for college, went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton and moved back to Africa to build businesses. And it's just the wild, wild west essentially in some areas where it's like, you don't have competition because you're charting the territory. And so there's just so much market share.
I think there's something to be said for that uncharted world, right? There's no competition because no one's really being able to tap into it. And for there's so much revolution and evolution that you can have within that culture across the entire continent because it's just truly untapped along the way. Now, from your perspective, I mean, what do you think is at the core of like why you're so passionate about this process of expansion into Africa?
Great question. So it's twofold. There's a heart motivation from my faith. It's just like man, we get one life, and at the end of my life, it's like I'd rather have a strong legacy than more money in the bank. And legacy is nothing more than the imprint of yourself that you leave on other people. And so I would just love to live a life that's full of making as great of an impact as I can. And Africa is the most impoverished continent on the planet. And so that would be kind of the heart side. But then the intellectual side is just, it's such a fun place because it's the place where the greatest need and the greatest opportunity collide. I mean, when you were just looking at the continent of Africa, it is the most ripe for expansion and the most beautiful explosion of economic activity that we could ever imagine. And so there's just so many tailwinds at the back, from the people and the talent to the technologies that allowing them to leapfrog. They're beyond our years in terms of certain payment technologies and things like that. The beautiful thing is they don't have the legacy infrastructure that they have to dismantle, or the lobbyists in Congress trying to prevent new technologies from being developed because they sunk billions of dollars into the old technologies. You've got an incredible amount of market forces coming behind them where new trade opportunities are opening up with the free trade area, the AFCFTA, the AU being in the G20, and I could just go on, but there's just so much opportunity there. And so it's so fun because it's just like a place where the need and the opportunity collide, and where I can just come alongside incredibly brilliant local entrepreneurs and empower them to be everything they were made to be.
Now, it brings up a question that I have. So you're saying that there's so much opportunity for investors to go in and really transform what that economy could look like. But what's the internal thoughts? The people that are already living in Africa, that are already trying to develop it, what are they saying about the idea of foreigners coming into their land and basically making money off the non-existing infrastructure that's in place?
So it's a great question. And I think you have to go back in history a little bit. Africa is a continent that has, over decades and decades, faced a lot of attempted colonization. People coming from Britain and wherever else to try to take territory. And there have been a lot of horrible things that have come from that. More recently, Africa has been categorized by this aid mentality, where I can still remember, I think it might have been the '06 Super Bowl commercial, where you had a bunch of A-list musicians singing "We Are the World," and there's like all of these pictures and videos of starving babies and you're just like, it painted this picture in America's mind that Africa is a place of need and dependency. And when I talk to African people about that, they hate it so much. They hate when people make videos about starving this, starving that. Like, they want you to see the capability, the opportunity, the potential that they have. And they don't see their countries and their communities as this place of enormous need and dependency. They see it as a place of opportunity. And they're brilliant people. And so we have done a disservice to the African people by expecting that they can't do anything for themselves and rushing in with aid when they didn't really need it. I'm not saying there's not a place for aid. There is, but it's like very targeted into like a certain period of time after war when you can't grow food and stuff like that, when you have massive diseases or famines or droughts or anything that's like that. Sure, there's a period of time where aid can be there. But if aid's still there 40 years from now, we did something horribly wrong. And so the heart that we have to come in with is really just this heart of humility. And that's why I went to just listen, to spend 6 months listening. And the amount of people, Jay, that said, thank you so much for just listening is mind-blowing. And the relationships I've built because of that, huge. And it's going to save us as we start to deploy capital and put money and whatnot behind local entrepreneurs. It's going to save millions of dollars because I spent time just listening with people, not trying to shove my square peg in a round hole. Not trying to say, hey, this is what I know needs to happen, let's make it happen. And then three years down the line, you're like, oh, that was a bad idea. And so just listening matters. And when you do that, people are like, oh my gosh, come. And so if I had one thing to say about that, like the refrain I've heard from Africans is that the solution to Africa's problems lie primarily with Africans. But the West has an enormous ability to walk alongside, to partner, and to empower them to reach and achieve their goals. They don't need us to come in and figure out, teach them how to build businesses as much as they need partners coming alongside them, helping them to turn their solutions into a scalable venture.
And turning those ideas into reality. I mean, even within the States, it's kind of no different than when a new. What were some of the other misconceptions that you may have identified when you were traveling in your time, other than the fact that they don't need the help that the American people typically think they do?
Yeah. The first and the biggest one that I realized within 2 days of landing in Kigali, Rwanda, that was my first stop, is that there is a massive dislocation between the perceived risks in Africa and the actual risks. And for an investor, that is just music to your ears, right? When I was trading bonds, what you are looking for, the way that you deliver alpha to your clients, to your LPs, is by finding dislocations between perceived and actual risk. So I'll give you an example. When I was trading regional banks and Silicon Valley went down on like March 8th or 9th of 2023, you had a sell-off in all regional banks. Silicon Valley Bank goes under. Charles Schwab stock drops like 42%. Charles Schwab is rated one of the highest banks in America. And their business model does not relate to Silicon Valley Bank hardly at all. But because the perceived risk was so high, people just started selling off like crazy. But then you had investors that looked under the hood and they looked at the balance sheet and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is selling off 42% and there's not, like, I don't see much that's a high risk. And so they bought in low. And to date, I think they've made over 100% return in the last 2 years. And so the opportunity lies between the perceived risk and the actual risk. And I don't think that there lies a greater dislocation in that than there is in Africa. And the reason that is because one of the reasons is we have, as the West and as capital providers, often lumped Africa together and treat it as one country when it's really a continent of 54 different countries. And so we see there are certainly countries that I would not put a dollar, that I would not recommend people to put $1 of investment capital. That is true, but it's not true for all 54 countries. But the issue is we have taken the stereotypes of the worst African countries and from a risk level in deploying capital, just layered the whole continent there. And so, yeah, you've got certain countries that have that risk level, but you've also got countries that have this level of risk. And so there's huge opportunity and huge alpha there because the valuations are so low because the perceived risk is so high. And so if you're willing to look under the hood and jump in and throw a few dollars behind this, like, there's a lot of money to be made.
It's almost like you're comparing the entire continent of Africa, just like someone would compare the states of America, right? There's certain states that you would not want to invest into development into here in the country, just like there's certain countries that you would not want to invest into in Africa. But there's also ones that can definitely be worth the reap, right? The juice is definitely worth the squeeze. Now, what about from a culture shock standpoint? Because obviously, African countries might have different cultures or cultural norms than in America. What were some of those that kind of shocked you when you were over there?
It's a good question. And it really, to be honest, it varies. So Africa is a continent of 54 countries. Within that, there's thousands of different tribes. I would say you feel a bit more of the tribe culture when you're out in the rural areas. But to be honest, I would say 90% of the people or places that I went, I didn't like the culture shock was that I didn't feel much of a culture shock because they've become in a lot of ways westernized in terms of the clothes they wear and the cars they drive and the way they do business. And so when you're talking to business people, it's like you could be sitting in America. Like you would have no idea. And so the way that, sure, is there a little bit of cultural nuances here and there? Yeah. But from a business standpoint, it's not that much. I think doing business in Asia has much more cultural implications than doing kind of large scale business in Africa.
Now, in your travels, where did you enjoy spending your time the most, both on a personal level and where you identified as this is kind of the cash crop location?
Yeah. So I love the outdoors. So I'd say out in the bush in Zimbabwe, there's some national parks and stuff that are just absolutely beautiful. Beautiful rock, mountains, all of that good stuff. So that was fun. Kigali, Rwanda, is absolutely beautiful. And Rwanda's seen a massive turnaround over the last 25 years. Rwanda is actually, we can talk more about this throughout the time, but Rwanda is one of the most beautiful, amazing stories that I have ever seen in my life. In 1994, there was one of the greatest genocides to ever take place in the face of the earth. Over 800,000 people were killed in just 100 days. And essentially what happened was it was brother turned against brother, friend against friend, teacher against student, athlete against coach. And it felt like it happened like that. But in reality, what happened over the 10 years prior is that the media started telling them that their neighbors were their enemies. And so for a decade or more, they start being fed this information that your neighbor is your enemy, your neighbor is your enemy, your neighbor is your enemy. And then it just took one thing for people to be like, yep, I believe it. To the point where I'm going to kill my friend. And 800,000 people died within 100 days.
Now, do you think that's a larger scale concept that could happen anywhere, or do you think that's localized to that specific region?
As I walked around that genocide memorial, I was terrified at how similar the days and months and years leading up to what happened then feels like in America now sometimes. And it's scary and it's humbling. And I sat there and I actually wrote a piece on got a website called AfricanMarketInsights.com where I just published some of my thoughts. And I wrote a piece about this because it was just sobering. When we start to believe the lie that our enemy is our neighbor, it makes people do incredibly crazy things. The last couple days are evident of that. Just some horrific things and stuff people are saying online afterwards. It's just, it brings such a heavy heart. But what I will say is the beautiful thing is that after that, President Kagame took power, and he was part of the tribe of people that were killed. So you got the Hutu and the Tutsis. He was part of the Tutsis. which were killed. And he got power and he said, we are not going to retaliate. We are going to forgive. And that is the only way forward. And he did. And the people started to forgive. And you go there today and you ask someone, are you Hutu or Tutsi? And they say, don't even ask me that, I'm Rwandan. They won't even say it. And it's like, they look at you like, what are you trying to say, violence? Like, I'm Rwandan. We're Rwandans. And yeah, that's messed up. And I lost my dad. And it's horrible. But we need to see each other as brothers. And so they've done an incredible job in that unity, in that they've had a zero tolerance policy for corruption as well. And so all of that has just led to this booming and beautiful place for Rwanda. I've only been 2 places in the world where they clean the streets, and that's Palm Beach, Florida, and Kigali, Rwanda. They literally have people sweeping streets all day long, sweeping sidewalks. I never saw a piece of trash while I was there. It's these beautiful rolling green hills, kind of like it feels like you're in North Carolina. And so those would be the places that I really enjoyed the most, I would say. But in terms of business and economic opportunity, I mean, Lagos, Nigeria is just, it feels like New York City. There is just a hum to that place, a hustle and bustle. Population size-wise, it's actually twice the size of New York City, that city, which is crazy. And it's not even the capital of Nigeria. The capital is in Abuja, 6 hours north or so. It's a port city on the water. It's kind of like their New York City. And it is just, the people there are grinders. They've never had much Western influence come in. And so they've always just had to fend for themselves. Never much aid, so they just figure stuff out, and they are just super smart, and they're going to do incredible things.
And gritty, it sounds like. The fact of the matter is they're willing to put in the work to reap the benefits because they've had no choice to. So and
it's such an inspirational thing for entrepreneurs here too, because you see these people who I was at a conference there. The conference was an African private equity venture capital conference, and it was at a nice hotel. You wouldn't know that you're not in the States in the hotel, and the people are walking around, getting coffees for people, and they have their black suit and tie on. It's a good chance that there's plenty of them that go home and sleep on dirt, but they get up and they put on their suit, and you would never know that it wasn't freshly cleaned. And they go and they grind, and it's just the most extraordinary work ethic. And so those are the types of people that I'm just I could pull behind you all day long,
Yeah, those are builders. Those are people that are going to make things done, make things happen. When every other thing is pointing in the direction of this isn't going to happen, they're going to find a way. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. I think those stories are immensely important because the fact of the matter is, even though we are a free country, even though we have more information at the palm of our hand than ever before, those are the things that we oftentimes overlook unless you intentionally are looking for it. And there's no website, there's no database that's going to tell that kind of story unless you're living and breathing the air that they're living and breathing. So thank you. Now, over the next 5 years, that puts us at 2030. What do you think is on the horizon, first and foremost, in Africa as far as development, and what do you think the rest of the world needs to kind of be looking out for in terms of the indicators for it?
Yeah, so Africa is going to see massive, massive, massive economic growth over the next 2 decades. When you look at the continent, Africa has the fastest growing population in the world. Their population will almost double over the next 25 years. And the next fastest growing population in the world is only going to grow 30% over that time. So they've got, by far and large, the largest population in the world. The average age of that population is 19, which means the bulk of the people are just coming into the workforce and are in their prime contribution years. And the continent is the second fastest growing economy in the world. And so you've just got this ripe, talent-based, incredible pool of people where you can, I think there's going to be a huge shift for service-based talent from places like India and Asia over towards Africa. And so I think that there's tremendous opportunity there for business leaders to, who need to outsource talent to hire people remotely on the ground. By the way, when you do that, you're contributing so much to the economic development of that place, because 100% of that value chain stays on the continent when you just pay them. So incredible stuff there. But I would say the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of infrastructure development too. Like the hard thing about building companies in Africa is that you don't just get to build the companies, but you have to build the infrastructure that companies are built on. And what I mean by that is not always the railroads and things like that, but like, if you were to build Amazon in America, you can start by building Amazon. If you want to build Amazon in a certain place in Africa, you've got to first address the whole place, because not everyone has an address. Then you've got to build a delivery and logistics service, because that's not readily available. And then you've got to build the Amazon. And the first two components of that are very capital intensive, low return. The latter is going to be super high return, but it just takes a little bit of time. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for intelligently structured capital when you get some like the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, the IFC, donors, all kinds of people coming together to fund some of that infrastructure side of things. And then you get private equity and venture capital coming to fund businesses. And so the next 5 years will be heavy growth, but heavy infrastructure development too. And I think in 10 years, you'll start to see that, V curve start to absolutely rip. I think in 12 years or so.
That just speaks a lot of testament, right? There's a lot on the horizon, and the exciting part is if you know where to look, you can be on the foresight of it. So for somebody in America that wants to be involved in that type of development, abroad, what would you recommend for someone in terms of getting involved now so that they're ready for when the wave hits?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so many ways to be involved. I post a lot about what's going on in different we'll highlight sometimes different organizations and companies and funds and stuff like that. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's Zac Sicher. Another great guy to follow would be Henry Kasner. You can go to solvingtheworldsgreatestproblems.org to see some of those opportunities that we're involved with. You can go to africanmarketinsights.com to see just more insights about Africa. And from there, I think those places would probably give people a good picture. And over time, we'll be posting about more opportunities and specific layout of funds and things like that if people want to get money into the game. On our side, on Solving the World's Greatest Problems, so I just joined this organization recently as a natural next step in my time in Africa, a place to turn insights into action. And Solving the World's Greatest Problems is a little bit of an arrogant name, but intentionally so, because it's more than an organization. It's really a movement saying, let's look at what we have in our hands today in this generation of people. We are the most well-equipped generation in the history of the world to tackle some of the world's greatest problems. And yes, it's audacious to think that we can tackle some of the world's greatest problems, but when you look back in history, we have more people than we've ever had, more volunteers than we've ever had, more capital than we've ever had. Up until 50 years ago, we didn't have planes connect us like they do today. 25 years ago, we didn't have the internet. 15 years ago, we didn't have phones in our pockets. 2 years ago, we didn't have AI. And so it's kind of just this audacious goal of saying, okay, let's pick some of these problems of human trafficking, of hunger, joblessness, things like that, and run after them. And let's deploy entrepreneurs, we call them builders, investors, and givers, all together in unity to solve some of these problems. Let's highlight best practices, let's share, let's care more about the name on the front of the jersey than we do on the back of the jersey. And what we've done is structured funds around each of these problems. And so if you're passionate about solving human trafficking, you put money into this donor advised fund. So it's a donation to start. But essentially that money is deployed, into funds that are investing in companies that are combating human trafficking. It's investing in rescue missions to rescue women and children caught in human trafficking. It's being deployed into holistic solution of recovery and all kinds of stuff. And so we're just trying to bring intelligent, thoughtful ways around solving some of these problems. And so the ones I am focused on are hunger and joblessness in Africa. And so, essentially just saying, how do we deploy capital behind Africa's best problem solvers? It's not Americans trying to solve the world's greatest problems. It's rallying the world behind the best problem solvers. And in Africa, that's African problem solvers. And so we're, finding the best and the brightest innovators to put capital behind to help them scale their solutions to their problems. So
that's amazing. I think you just hit the nail on the head, which is the best problem solvers are the people that are living the problem, right? Africans are going to solve African problems, just like Europeans are going to solve European problems.
Yep.
You know, I would like to say Americans will solve American problems, but we have a whole lot of problems right now.
We do.
And, you know, I think in the future, we need to start thinking about not like I said earlier, not going in to solve the problem, but be able to equip and enable the people that know the solution to have the resources to solve it. So, Zach, I just want to say thank you so much. Your perspective, firsthand accounts, is so valuable. And I think that with more people like you investing their time, energy, sweat, and tears into, you know, a developing world, we have a bright future and they have a brighter future. So I just want to say thank you for being part of the conversation this week, Zach.
Thanks.
How's the best way for someone to reach out if they had any questions or wanted to learn more about your story?
Yeah, I mean, I think LinkedIn's probably the best. LinkedIn, so you can follow me, Zac Sicher, on LinkedIn, or you can go to AfricanMarketInsights.com. Post a lot of thoughts and insights there as well. So please feel free to reach out. Would love to get to know your audience.
Fantastic. Well, audience, thank you so much for another great episode. New episodes are posted every Tuesday on YouTube, and shorts are posted on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. LL Podcast _ on all platforms. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Thanks, man.